Hey everyone, welcome to Nerd. Today's episode is on the 1996 crossover DC vs. Marvel and features amazing guest Michael Vincent Bramley, aka MVB, who you can find over at mvbramley.art. That's spelled MVBRAMLEY.ART. A little housekeeping. This is actually going to be the first episode of Nerd with exclusive bonus content. Not shockingly, Michael and Jeff are fountains of knowledge when it comes to comics. So if you want to hear more about rhyming in England, how MVB once got internet famous by writing a Deadpool movie, and comics, you can head over to patreon.com/Jeff May. Honestly, this gets very meta because you can vote on the outcome of a custom comic homage page drawn in the style of Lobo versus Wolverine in DC versus Marvel by MVB, except the parts are played by me and Jeff. And extra meta, Jeff and Michael actually have like a 10 to 15 minute discussion that's about DC versus Marvel. It's not really a debate, but it does show their knowledge. And again, that's over at patreon.com/Jeff May, where you can get bonus contents on shows like Nerd Now, Jeff Has Cool Friends, and Ugh Fine with Kim Crawl. One other bit of housekeeping, if you head over to patreon.com/Jeff May, you can produce shows just like this one. And I'd like to shout out two producers, drinkwithmikeslater.com, every time Drake, hey, that's me, plugs the back catalog, and Jeff has a 12-inch Tick action figure. See, that's a comic pun. Their names kind of got mucked up in the edit, and I didn't want them to get removed. So, hey, if you're a producer, we'll make sure to treat you right. One last time, patreon.com/Jeff May. I cannot wait for you to listen to this show. It's one of my favorites. DC versus Marvel, 1996.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another glorious episode of Nerd with Dre and Jeff. Now, of course, I'm the second half of that. Some would say the worst half, Jeff, which means with me I have...
Got Dre Alvarez. This is really tough, Jeff, but I'm going to go with the Superman to your Spider-Man, Ben Reilly, not Peter Parker Spider-Man. And also, Jeff, we got a third. So who are we coming with? Michael, who are you going to take?
I guess I'm Access. I'm somewhere in the middle.
Folks, we're very excited to be joined by the incredibly talented and amazing Michael Vincent Bramley. We will most likely call him MVB during this show because it sounds really cool to do that. Now, Michael Vincent Bramley, aside from making the Nerd Christmas card, you also do a lot of projects with a lot of our sister channels, right? You do stuff with Gamefully Unemployed, Small Beans, right? What else do you got going on?
Well, I'm working on a comic right now. I'm not fully ready to announce it yet. I'm also always illustrating. My commissions are always open.
Some would say it's too affordable. And just as a quick heads up too, Dre is holding up the amazing Christmas card that we did there. But definitely want to check out MV Bramley. That's BRAMLEY art on Instagram for examples of his incredible work. Really great stuff, man. Seriously. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And that's also your website as well, which has like the tiny links, a bunch of your cool stuff. By the way, you are more than welcome to, if you would like, on your portfolio, if you want to add the Nerd Christmas card, I would feel honored to have it amongst all of some of the other amazing work. Because as I already mentioned, I have so much of the podcast art. I mean, like your Struzen-esque Spiel Boys is one of my favorites. That is just so beautiful.
I have a suggestion. Pin up in the back of the trade paperback when he finally puts the comic out.
That would be amazing.
To pay us several $1,000s for the rights. But I mean, you have to do that.
If you don't know where you are at Nerd, the amazing podcast show where we do trilogies. This season's trilogy is on comics. We're calling it Comic Origins, but it's not the origins of the characters, although the first one was. It's the origins of the creatives, and we wanted some amazing creatives. As mentioned, Michael Vincent Bramley has done a bunch of created work, so we wanted him on the show. One of the content creators for Nerd, and we've got another content creator that will be on the show next month. Yeah. And what I basically pitched, as I said, is there a run from your childhood that like you would just like to discuss, as well as discussing like your childhood intro to comics, etc. And you brought DC versus Marvel. So we are 100% going to be discussing that. But I was also curious because you had some other fun, fascinating stuff. You're from across the pond. Your intro into comics is way different than me and Jeff, where both of us, I think, said we had like Disney and stuff.
Well, first of all, actually, a little house cleaning here. I did recommend another comic. That was my actual intro into comics, but I've been told we can't mention.
You can I'm
okay doing this. Audience, I need you to start yelling at Jeff. Do your write-ins right to.
I will stand firm on why I told you to fuck.
No, Jeff
awesome.
is right. So the suggestion actually was the Clone Saga. And
Yes.
Jeff said that would be the most dense thing. And so the answer to me is, yeah, that can't be a single episode, which is what we are going
That
for.
would be a 9-hour episode.
But that could be a trilogy or something in the future. And basically, it's like, if we can get the budget, if we can get the push. But I did even see a Clone Saga book when we start talking comic books. So that is something that I have as a dream. Clone Saga with you two involved somehow, sometime in the future. But yes, for a single episode, which is what we were going for here, we wanted more condensed.
Yeah.
DC versus Marvel is a
Yeah.
4-part series.
Well, yeah, because it really comes down, for those of you that are not aware, the Clone Saga was this absolute disaster in the Spider-Man universe based off
I don't know what you're talking about. I thought it was great.
one little issue in like 1978 or something like that with the Jackal and clones. And they were like, we need to do a Death of Superman for Spider-Man. What do we do? And they made it this Clone Saga. They wanted to reinvigorate the character by doing a saga that lasted, and counting all the runs, like 100 and something issues. And so that's why when it was like the Clone Saga, I'm like, that is not a possible thing. There's no real, because it starts way in the back, and then it has this like several years long across 4 different titles storyline of like different clones doing weird shit, fake deaths.
It lost its way really hard. It was actually initially very well received, but it completely lost its way.
Very well sold initially.
Yeah.
It was, I was definitely like 13, 14 when that happened. And even Wizard Magazine was just like, what are they doing?
Yeah, even I was going to try and pretend like I thought the whole thing was great, but I can't keep that up. It was bad.
It's just, so it was like gimmicks. And I was like, look, I love that's an origin. It's just, that's not probable. Like, it's not because you can't even do one volume. You can't even do like the 6 issues of it because it's not a problem. There's no way to do that. You have to sum up everything. It was impossible.
Yeah.
And so I was like, and they were like, well, I have these other ones. And one of them was Marvel versus DC. And I'm like, that actually is a perfect opportunity.
Yeah. But I also picked it because, well, I mean, the Spider-Man in that book is Ben Reilly, who, for those of you who don't, well, no, I didn't pick it.
We tricked him.
Well, it's so funny because when I started reading this and then I saw the costume, I was like, God damn it, I forgot. Because it's
page 1 too.
It's
like
on the spider. It's the worst Spider-Man costume. And it's funny, and we'll get into it a little bit, but the script is purposefully has to be very heavy and full of exposition. Because my name is Ben Reilly, even though I would go by Peter Parker, who was a clone. Because this is, as we're going to find out, the origins of this is we're going to go bankrupt if we do not sell some comics. What do we do?
Yeah. So I'll get back to the original question. Yeah, in the UK, we didn't have easy access to American comic books at that time, but we had our own. You probably all heard of 2000 AD. I was a little too young for it. So I had these books that were aimed at little children. They were called The Beano and the Tandy. And they were home to characters like Dennis the Menace, British Dennis the Menace, the one that looks like Sid Vicious. The one who actually, his whole thing is he just bullies other children. And we were all okay with that. So, that was my real introduction to comics. But I was kind of outgrowing them by the time I was around 9 years old. And I had an older friend who introduced me to Marvel comics. And it was, like you said, during the sludge of the 90s, where everything had to be a little darker and grittier. And that really appealed to me at that age. It all felt like I was reading something very adult, something that, it's this childish stuff that I'm familiar with. The Clone Saga, for all of its flaws and everything, was dealing with some fairly weighty themes at the time.
Yeah, so I guess identity and
identity.
What is the self? It's very
a crumbling marriage, And then in the very first issue of Spider-Man I ever read, Spider-Man actually died, was resurrected by Dr. Octopus. He was then murdered by Kane. So
that's the Spectacular Spider-Man issue. It's a blue cover.
It's great art in that book as well. I know Bill Sienkiewicz did the inks. I don't know why that's a fact that sticks in my head, but I think it's because it probably looks a bit more like his work. I'm a huge fan of Bill Sienkiewicz. I was familiar with Spider-Man from Saturday morning cartoons, and it took this character and just put them in scenarios that I didn't realize were possible. So I just became obsessed with comics after that. And
Nice.
my older friend who introduced me, he lost interest. So I'd managed to trade like some toys I didn't want for his entire collection, and that just that
Do you
was
still have any of what's your I see a bunch of stuff on bookshelves behind you. What's your collecting status at the moment?
I mean, I'm not. You guys, I believe, are collectors. You'll get things graded, and I'm just surrounded by this mess. I love books. I love having them around, but I don't collect them like collectibles. I keep these to read or to reference the artwork. So yeah, I mean, I still have most of my childhood collection. I sold some of it before I left England, but I kept as much as I could. So I do still probably have some of those issues that I got.
Nice.
And they were just starting to do British reprints of a few titles around that time. We had an X-Men book, a Spider-Man book, and Wolverine book, and they all reprinted 3 issues.
They also, Marvel had a big UK push around 1993. And Dre, you actually, your recent episodes of I Must Drake You doing the Marvel Universe Series 4 cards, actually, there's an entire page of British themed characters that were designed specifically for the UK. And you had like Death's Head 2, because Death's Head was also a Marvel UK book. You had Wild Thing. You had all those. It's just dog shit in the UK instead of dog shit in America at the time. It's really not good. So it's important to know a little bit of backstory in that the comics industry is in a free fall, primarily because comics, it was revealed that old comics are valuable. And so now new comics started really pushing the collectability factor of it. They overproduced, they overspent. Eventually, people started to realize that if something's called a collector's item and there's a million of them, it's not a collector's item. So these companies start crashing, and they start crashing hard. Marvel is teetering on bankruptcy, which it will declare. DC is running out of superheroes to cripple and kill. And so what we're looking at here is Marvel and DC. Image Comics is, barely, Image Comics being just an imprint, like it doesn't have the same overhead that Marvel and DC has. They're a publisher, really. But, a lot of the books, you're not getting 6 different brigade titles. It's rough. It is rough. And so we see that there's like a nice friendly rivalry between Marvel and DC. A lot of the creators are all friends. A lot of people work for the same companies. And you have basically Mike Carlin and I believe it's Mark Grunwald, right?
Yes, and this is a nice spot for that. Jeff, shouting out local comic shops. I managed to pick up the DC versus Marvel Omnibus, which was released just last year.
I saw it in Everyone Comics where I picked it up. I saw it in December. I think it was new on the shelf, just late December.
Okay, so yeah, it's brand new.
Everyone Comics, and anybody else you want to shout out to that store? Oh,
my buddy Raymond works there. He's great. Follow him, Raymond Lee Salvador. He's a fantastic artist.
Everyone Comics. For me, I wound up. It was the 4th one I went to, but this was awesome. This was, Jeff, better house in my opinion. The House of Heroes comic in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And this felt like kismet because I was like, this is a pricey book. It's $150, but it's worth it. But Michael has it. Jeff, you picked up a copy.
And also, but there's a reference to Oshkosh, Wisconsin, right?
Yes.
Like, in the book.
Grunwald said he started reading comics in Oshkosh. And I was like, you know what? I got no complaints. This is perfect. I went to Oshkosh to pick up this book. The Marvel editors started reading comics. So yeah, that's the shout out there. So to the start of this.
Yeah. And so, of course, my good friend Leland over at House of Secrets actually loaned me his personal copy of the Omnibus and allowed me to remove the shrink wrap because he's like, it's going to take me a few months before I get to read this. He let me unwrap it. I mean, because Leland's one of my very close friends, one of the few people I exchange gifts with, every year. Just one of the best people. And of course, House of Secrets, now certainly not in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, but it is pretty much the local comic shop for most people in comics and animation because they live in like this area. So, you get to see some really, I've met Bruce Timm and Paul Dini there shopping, it's a really cool spot. And I'm very blessed and lucky to go there and see some of my amazingly cool friends while I go there. But a big shout out to Leland Pierce from House of Secrets for loaning me his copy. It is really great.
And I think you said, Grunwald from Wisconsin and then Mike Carlin.
And so like,
which cover did you guys get?
Gibbons.
Jim Lee.
We all went
I
for
think
Lee,
that's-
right?
I
We
got
all
Jim
did.
Lee. I didn't get a choice. I probably would have gone for Gibbons. I love Dave Gibbons.
Really?
but,
You would have gone for the Gibbons
It's
cover.
a super uninspired piece, if I'm being
Oh,
honest.
I haven't actually
Like,
seen it, so
I mean, to be fair, Jim Lee is they basically did the same drawing. But so now, okay, so, and this is also very important, and this is something that's a big deal. When the pandemic hit, I was a big thing. Support your local comic shop. Stop buying stuff on Amazon, right? Local comic shops will often price match, but please do that. Jeff Bezos does not need more of your money to destroy the country or the world, realistically speaking. So anyway, support your local comic shops. And local comic shops were having a very hard time in 1995. They had too much. They had all these Ultraverse books. They had all these Valiant books. They had all these Image books that nobody wanted anymore. And they had spent all this money to order these books with the idea that they were going to pay off, and they just stopped. So the industry needed a shot in the arm. And so what they did was basically Marvel and DC agreed to co-publish a crossover that was to be like the biggest crossover of all time. They had crossed over before. Famously, I'd say the three most famous ones before that would have been Spider-Man and Superman, which was the first one. Then Batman and Hulk, which is like this most 70s ass crossover you could possibly think. Because in what world would those two?
I think that was in 81.
Was it 81? Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
70s, I guess. You know what I'm saying? You know, I mean, it's just like what characters had TV shows, like,
Yeah.
and which was smart too, right? I guess, you know, publishing something that was basically, you know, the two syndicated in reruns television shows at the time, right? But and then probably what many people consider the greatest was X-Men and, you know, Teen Titans. That's many people consider that to be the best Marvel DC crossover, and with good reason. It's great. But so they had done this before. This was not new, but there's always been this sort of like fan fiction concept of who would really win. Because it's always, all these team ups are always misunderstanding team up to beat the villains, right? And that's how it pretty much always happens. It's big status quo stuff, right? And Marvel and DC were like, all right, we got to do this, but we got to do this in a way that will match up. And so they basically had the like, there are what we consider undercard fights. And those are the fights that are just going to be written in a, yeah, it's obvious this is who would win. And then there were main events, 5 main events, right? And those were voted upon. And so that gives you the tiebreaker option, right? Like the which one. And so that's your idea. The two people that they grab are Ron Mars and Peter David, which I think are two great choices for writing. And I would have loved to have seen what they could have created without a mandate.
That's sort of an equal time thing that they apparently it's very restrictive writing these crossovers because they're trying to serve the fans of both sides.
Yeah, it's like
Everybody
filming a
has to be-
Fast and Furious movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, a lot of egos that need to be soothed and stuff like that. But
You can even see that in the title because it changes from issue to issue, from Marvel versus DC to DC versus Marvel.
yeah, and that's on who gets the publication rights to the issue. So
Oh, I didn't
Marvel
know that.
published issues 1 and 3, and DC did 2 and 4. And of course, now I don't know if that's like a flip of a coin or something, but like what a gift to Ron Mars that he gets to write the first issue, because issue 1s always outsell, right? They always outsell the rest. So that issue 1, you know, your money's going to be even higher on residuals than it is on any of the other ones. But so you have Ron Mars and Peter David, who are, I think, two great indicative characters of this kind of stuff. They're good at cosmic work. You know, Peter David, you know, he does a lot of really great stuff with that. Ron Mars, of course, being Green Lantern, but also a very talented Silver Surfer writer. He does a lot of really great galactic stuff. So it makes sense, right?
Yeah, didn't he create and write 90s Superboy as well? Ron Mars, or was he?
Well, he was
Bramley?
doing Kyle Rayner Green Lantern. He was doing Green Lantern at the time. I'm not 100% sure, and I didn't look into that. He very well could have. But these are two guys that both have well-known and established information about both universes, right? They're both comic book dorks. And that's good. It's good to get there. Now, as far as pencilers go, it's the best of what's around, I want to say. And I'm not trying to insult any of them, because I think Dan Jurgens, you know, did a very pivotal role. He drew the Death of Superman, for God's sake. You wouldn't go look at Dan Jurgens and be like, what a dynamic style of the time. It's just, this is a guy who knows how to do normal Silver Age art. And that's not bad. But it's definitely interesting because then they reached out, like Marvel, they wanted John Romita Jr. first, and he just flat out refused.
Really?
Yeah.
I
And
would've
so they
thought
got,
everybody would want this.
I think John Romita Jr. grew up in comics. I don't think there's a lot of artistic freedom allowed in this.
Yeah, no, I guess.
You know, your
yeah.
flourishes, to some people, their freedoms and flourishes are more important than the paycheck. And Romita seems like the kind of guy that's like that, who, by the way, shout out to his cameos in Daredevil Born Again. But so, and then they got Claudio Castellini, who is essentially just a reborn Silver Age artist in the 1990s, right? He's a Buscema disciple, just like a system guy. And they did that, which is good for the books because they have a uniform quality to them. But unfortunately, it looks like the book was drawn in the 80s with aggressively 90s characters.
I would say aggressively 90s coloring, which I don't hate.
It's early digital coloring.
You wouldn't see that you certainly wouldn't see that look in an 80s comics. That's full on.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I mean, I think it was high glossy, good print, stuff like that. And of course, this was early coloring stuff. If we remember, that's why Marvel, I believe, bought Malibu Comics, was specifically for their digital coloring system, which is so weird to me. But, you know.
But yeah, I know, Jeff, you mentioned the forward by Ron Mars in the Omnibus, which is really useful. That was a debate initially, right, on this crossover. Do we do the classic characters or you do the modern? And the mandate from up high is we're trying to sell books. You put the clones in those books. There's no vintage Superboy. And so it's funny because it's basically, to your point, it's the sensibilities of the 80s comics with these big names. But then you sent me the alternate script outro, Michael, and I was reading it and I'm like, classic smart Hulk with a thoughtful monologue at the end of his fights. Classic. They were votes. They knew who was going to win.
Yeah.
But they were like, just in case people vote for, spoiler alert, Hulk beating Superman. That one I'm okay giving away. And if any of us pick Hulk, we're wrong. They made like an alternate one, and it's Smart Hulk. So I'm watching it.
I mean, that is Professor Hulk.
Superman.
But like that, see, that's not, I don't think that's the bad. Here's the thing. I think Superboy should have been the way Superboy was at the time. I think Hulk should have been Professor Hulk because it's an important part of the character, and he always has been. I think it's designs more than the character choices themselves. For example, Punisher having a ponytail.
I never liked Superman with long hair. I always felt like
Sure, I can deal with Superman with the long hair, though. I can handle Superman with long hair because the costume, it's not like Superman blue and Superman red, which was going to come right behind the corner.
Yeah, if this had been 2 years later, can you imagine Superman blue and red fighting the Hulk, I guess?
I'd say the most egregious version of a bad moment in time visually, aside from Spider-Man, which I will always say I hate the Ben Reilly Spider-Man costume.
It is over-designed.
Thor's design is...
It's like a leather daddy. It's really...
it's an affront to taste. He's wearing belly shirt armor. Mjolnir now has a chain on it because Spawn has chains.
Yeah, let's just break. He's wearing like a leather crop top.
It's like leather daddy shit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so weird.
It's 90s. They wanted to make him look like an Image character. And
yeah, I think, though, you see some of that working in other places. I don't know about you guys, but the Aquaman redesign at the time with the harpoon for
you mean the good, interesting story-based design that is built on trauma and depression? Yes.
Yes, it's good.
It's almost like there were reasons to change the character.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, the same could be said for Superboy. Actually, I've always had a lot of love for that specific Superboy design.
That's Superboy. Ramos as well. And by the way, it is, I think, Carl Kessler, I believe, is the author. But then also, by the way, can I see how I fall here? You're both amazing artists, and I'm probably the weakest artistically, both in terms of knowing artists and being able to draw out of this group. What were your thoughts on the Azrael death of like the Batman death, like when he did like the armor and
Oh,
stuff?
the
What were
arm
your
that was actually the Joe Quesada designed Azrael bats, as bats from
yeah.
that we saw starting in what, Batman 500?
Bane
I,
cracks
I'm
his
gonna out
back and
myself. I
he
liked that
Yes.
design, like armor, the like blue armor, like gold when he takes over the mantle of the bat when
So
Bruce.
here's something that I'm not sure you're aware of. Nobody is supposed to like that design. That design was created to show people this is what you get when you try to modernize and change something too drastically for the moment. It was
it was they
like
were trolling the audience.
that is literally, yeah, that was the plan. And it's not saying that it's not a bad design, but it's a
It
very
is a bad
90s
design. I'll
it
say
is
it. It's a terrible.
well, no,
design.
it's a purposefully 90s trapped in amber design of blades and armor and like an unrealistic design of the character saying, if this is what you think you want, we're going to show you why you're wrong. And that
Wasn't that what Lobo was as well? Lobo in general as a concept was meant to be like a pastiche of
the
all of the
parody
badass.
character. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Lobo in general is just, a very Keith Giffen style character, like an
So
amber.
it's funny because you're basically saying they were like, "What if we give you basically Count Chocula with maple syrup on it?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is delicious." And they're like,
Yeah, they made well.
"You're
What
not."
they're doing is they made fans smoke the whole carton, and with the knowledge that they were always going back, and that's the other thing. Aside from Green Lantern, the Hal Jordan thing, the plan was always to go back to the status quo. That's comics, and when
They
things
were
get,
offering the illusion of some kind of progression in the 90s.
yeah, and
They were taking like these concepts that would have supported a single Silver Age issue and stretching them out of like several months or years.
yeah, and
Things like Superman Red and Blue.
the that bat armor design, the Asbats design, was purposely created to be like a parody of what was happening, but a subtle parody.
Well, I
They,
got RoboCop and Batman, is what you're telling me. I'm like, yeah, that Batman costume's awesome. And they're like, Dre, it's a joke. I'm like, listen, 12-year-old me didn't know.
it's not so much it would be a joke the same way, like, again, a dad having the kids smoke the whole pack being a joke. It's more like this is the reality of what you think you're getting into, and I want you to see how much it would suck. It's more that than like a joke. It's more just, oh, you want to see what this really is? Well, here you go. And that's neat. I think that the Knight's Quest and Knight's End storylines are interesting in that it is sort of a meta commentary on where the comics industry was going at the time. And it's actually surprisingly well thought out for a publisher that was kind of flailing at the time. But what it really comes down to is by choosing these designs and, being like making them not sort of like Secret Wars plucked out of different times, you are certainly limited. Your word bubbles are going to be filled with a lot of exposition. Peter Parker, excuse me, Ben Riley, but I go by Peter Parker because it's like they have to keep doing that for the reader to be like, hey, I know you love Spider-Man. This guy's Peter Parker, but he's also Ben Riley. He's a clone. Maybe he wasn't a clone.
I think that they did their best to write him as Peter Parker for the majority of that story, and they even drew him to look like Peter Parker instead of Ben Riley in the Daily Bugle.
But he's single.
Yeah,
because the other
and
guy
he hits on Lois and strikes out.
So it's just, but that's one of those things where it's like when you are stuck writing with a mandate, this is what we have to do. You're using these characters. This is how it has to go. You are sort of trapped in that box. So a big shout out to Ron Mars and Peter David for pulling a rabbit out of the hat, so to speak, of trying to work within the confines of a very difficult project to do it in 4 prestige format comics. And then, the books that they were writing when we get to the amalgam stuff, which we'll talk about. But
Maybe I'm wrong, but like, I'd definitely be interested to a lot of what you both just said. Like, the 4 really constrained it. Felt very Game of Thrones season 7, because yeah, at one point they have Peter Parker and Clark Kent, both working at the Daily Planet that's been bought out by Kingpin and J. Jonah Jameson, or the Daily, whatever. Yeah.
A lot of people buying the Daily Planet apparently in 1995.
Yeah.
The
But I'm just saying,
implication of some bigger subplot that didn't matter.
but like that's what's funny is, right, we want these big stories and write it and vote and email AOL. Seriously, if you look at the back of these comics, they're like, you could also, it was a new thing. It's, by the way, go on the interwebs and you can email us at AOL to vote for your favorite characters. I was like, this is as 90s as hell. But that premise, right? Spider-Man, Superman, same newspaper, don't know about each other. Kingpin's buying it.
Right.
I was like, this is an amazing idea. And it's 5
Yeah.
panels that disappears.
Yeah,
That's been done twice before in the original team.
Yeah. In
That's
the
they're repeating old grind. Even Spider-Man striking out with DC women has been done back in.
Yeah, it's really funny, but it is well done. But again, this is clearly a magic trick. It's clearly a sleight of hand stunt. Nobody doesn't think that. So that it's fun to own it. And that, I think, is a very important part that comes down to the Marvel versus DC run and why we're selling $150 omnibuy, of books that aren't particularly good. Now, the cool thing about this is that I believe this was the benefit of a week 5 Wednesday. So every few months, there's a 5th Wednesday, and that's usually a trash week for comics. So a lot of times they would do editors' books or, assistant editor books, or they would do these random specials. I believe the DC Looney Tunes crossovers were a week 5 push. And I think the Amalgam books, if I recall correctly, and I might be wrong, but I believe those were all released on a week 5.
That makes sense.
As a, hey, here we go. Like, this is the placeholder of the book, right? Which I think is great. It's a good way to be able to put those in there. They had great creative teams working within their confines. And we can talk a little bit about Amalgam. I know that's not the point. I like that Amalgam books did not start as origin stories. They put you in the middle of a story. I think that was brilliant.
It's a good way of establishing it as its own universe. And you get these little hints that
Yeah. And they really
do the editor's note, the asterisk with check out this issue. Like at first I was, wait, did I miss an issue? And it's, no, they're just doing the classic. And I love that.
When I was a kid and I first read it, I actually didn't realize they were only issue 1s. I went to my local comic shop, Abstract Sprocket in Norwich, and I asked them for, I was like, is there any more Amalgam? I think I pronounced it Amalgam.
I called him Magneto for way too long. Don't worry about that.
But I was asking for these because it was telling me there'd be an issue 2, and I didn't get as a child that it was a joke. So I was a bit disappointed.
Now,
am I wrong about this? Is Abstract Sprocket, was it on 29th Street, Benedict's in Norwich?
Yeah.
The one, it's still there. That is awesome.
Oh, yeah. No, the guys that run it are great.
Yeah, there's definitely some stuff that they try to squeeze in a lot. There are some beautifully well done panels once we start the crossover. And we can just jump really to the crossover that basically the premise of the entire story is the Marvel universe and the DC universe are sort of represented by these 2 cosmic beings, right? And that's not new. Cosmic Marvel has that with like eternity and all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these 2, and they're basically considered siblings. They're like coexisting universes that have never really noticed each other. And they see each other and they're like betta fish. They just see each other and they just start crashing together. And there are characters that have existed as sort of shards of these characters, sort of like not necessarily representatives, but there's this kind of like fake homeless guy who's trying to hold together it looks like
the
a
literal
box,
mystery
but it's a temporal, yeah. It's this temporal warp that takes him across there. And basically the universes start to merge, right?
Yeah.
And the premise is that they both understand that if they were to fight, it would take eons. So they'll just pick champions from each one. And it is, yes, go ahead.
No, this kind of, I'm wondering why Peter Parker was alive. Did the brother from Marvel just really like Ben Reilly? Was he a big fan of the Clone Saga? I'm kind of curious about why he chose that.
That would have been amazing if they had, because I was going to say this is meta as hell, right? Because literally they're like, why are Marvel and DC fighting? They're like, well, there are these two beings that control all of the characters that know about each other, and they kind of fight, and they're trying to fight to be the only one in the universe. And you're like, and they're like, and one of them's name is DCicus, and the other one's name is Marvelicus. You're like, little
Marvicus, yeah.
yeah, but I was going to say it would have been hilarious because I was going to ask about author avatars and stuff like that. I'm really curious if Access has a little more in it. It would have been hilarious if the god was just like, and I choose you, Ben Reilly, as my champion, the superior Spider-Man, the one that anyone who knows, they're just like, had just gone off and be like, if people are complaining you're a clone, Kevin Smith, I keep bringing up Kevin Smith, but Kevin Smith actually did that in Chasing Amy, right? Where he like had a scene where they're literally telling off an internet fan. And that would have been hilarious if like
Yeah. Wait,
Morris did that.
do you mean Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back?
No, in Chasing Amy, they like get in a fight at a comic convention early on.
Oh, yeah,
where-
with
No,
Alan
and,
Seed,
and he
yeah,
is
yeah. The
literally
Inker.
responding to a comic, not that like the Sting Palm thing. He is responding to a comment, and it may actually even be a deleted scene, but there is a scene in Chasing Amy that is a legit response Kevin Smith put into his movie to a critique of his previous movie. Mallrats. Artists do that all the, writers
Sure.
do that all the time. Would have been hilarious.
Yeah. So basically there's a character who's I'm just a kid, but he ends up becoming this character named Access, who is essentially the band-aid of these two universes. He contains a shard of their blah 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 blah. It's crap. Dre?
Teacher Jeff,
Yes.
I missed this and I apologize. Do we ever get resolution on the bum? So there's this bum guarding
He
his bottle.
dies.
He
He
dies,
dies.
but I'm
He
saying
absorbs
they're
himself back
even.
into the ether, right?
If you read the later issues, and a minor spoiler here, I guess, but they later decided he's the older version of Axis, and there's
Oh.
a time travel thing. It's this. You're right. It's bullshit.
That is classic though. And actually, by the way, that another minor spoiler. If you're going to read the Punisher, one of the they're like two Wonder Woman amalgams, which is fascinating. But one of them, Punisher, has like a son who ends up on Apocalypse and comes back in the future. So they're loving time travel in the DC versus Marvel amalgam universe.
You're just what it is. It's they're just kind of making a lot of MacGuffin characters, if that makes sense, in order to get you to the banging of the action figures together. Then that really, and so in that case, you're just like, all right, look, I'm not here. And that's why you can't expect Marvel versus DC to be a particularly great story, because that's not what it's about. It's about, hey, you can see what Elektra would look like fighting Catwoman. And that's fun. That is very fun. So what I want to do, Dre, I don't know if you knew this, but before we get into these battles, did you know that we have producers on the show?
Did we battle them against each other? Head over to patreon.com/Jeff May. You can produce shows like these. You can get cards sent to you in the mail. You can get Christmas cards by Michael Vincent Bramley sent to you at the right tiers. And I am hoping to make that a yearly thing, Michael. So your friend in the neighborhood.
Hold on one second. I just realized I have to change one of the names.
Ooh, you got a second name change.
I got one. Don't worry about that. I'm in here. A big shout out, of course, to the Enchanted Wandering Unpierced Left Nipple Cider served at room temperature. A big shout out to Dan Hackroyd. Burrito, my best friend. Hey guys, it's your friendly neighbor Jeff May here. What do I think is even sexier than producer names? It's pickles. God damn it, do I love me a big old thick, bumpy, veiny pickle? If you're not going to eat yours, please, no matter what I say after this, send them to me. That is infuriating. Drink with Mike Hom every time Dre plugs the back catalog. So you're all drunk by now. El Celdo says, organize and fight. No one will give you what you need by asking nicely. And that is why I mug people. And finally, from my end, Bobby Opulent would like to offer Jeff a nice brioche bun in this trying time. Dre.
We're going for Bimmy and Jimmy Outfighting Crime, a.k.a. Robin and Jubilee Outfighting Crime, which does happen in a follow-up episode of Access. True story. Shout out to our three-face producer, Norm from Cheers. Two-Face also shows up in that same thing. All right, I'm going to start calling Yoda Old Grogu just to see what happens. Funny note, on the Ron Mars podcast episode I listened to, they mentioned the Mandalorian a ton, so appropriate. Your own Porcelain Jesus. And finally, Ricky Cilantro, which my dog also loves if my mic didn't tune out. So thank you very much. So what do you got?
want to just put a little segment in here. I'm just going to hijack for a second. If you guys would check your email.
I just looked at it, dude.
So I've got a little gift for you if you'd like to describe it.
Basically, Michael Vincent Bramley made a recreation of the Lobo versus Wolverine fight, but he replaced it with me and Dre.
So here's the idea here is I've done the entire page, but the last few panels I've left out. So if your listeners would like to vote on,
Oh my God.
what do you
This
guys
is
would like to
so
put up a poll?
cool.
I'll release the final three, or I'll send you the final three panels in a week. Let's say a week.
Oh my God. So this is so great. Oh my God. And I'll find a way to put on the Patreon. I'll put a vote after we publish the episode. I'm going to publish the episode, and then I'm also going to put a questionnaire to vote which way and whatever the patrons pick. So if you want to be a member of that voting populace, head on over to patreon.com/Jeff May, and you can get not just early access to Nerd, and you can also be a producer of this show, but you can also vote on who's going to win. And I have a feeling I know who's going to win.
I can't. You got me speechless, man. That was.
It's incredible. It's so good.
This is. Oh my gosh. This is. Yeah.
It's so good. Like the stuff that you put in there. I can't wait to share this. I'm so excited. So good. So
it's a bit of fun.
Thank you so much.
It's so incredible. It's great.
More than welcome. Thanks for having me. Let's talk about the fights.
Let's talk about the fights too, and this is really what it came down to be about, right? Like we can talk about the origins of this all right. And I think we covered that pretty well, right? Marvel published issues 1 and 3, DC covered 2 and 4. We have the creative teams, right? Mars and Castellini on 1 and 3. And then we have the
Peter David and Dan Jones.
Right. Okay. So we have our sort of like lower card battles, and like the ones that sort of people really pushed. And I'm actually surprised the first one wasn't one of the vote ones, which was Aquaman versus Namor.
And so, yeah, to your clarification, 5 were voted on, 6 were undercard. It does seem like you as a boxing promoter, Jeff, would know, right? This was set up to be very even split, right? Like they even said, I think when I was either reading the omnibus or listening to Ron Mars, it was like on the 5 fan votes, they were fairly certain how all of them were going to shape up. The only one was interesting was Storm versus Wonder Woman.
And like another example of how popularity contests can violate, it's comics. That's another reason that like whenever you're on social media and you're like, can you believe this person said the Punisher could take Deathstroke? And these are not real.
First time I ever visited the DC offices, I was told by editors that Wonder Woman wasn't really one of the 3 most popular characters.
No.
Which is, she's always billed as that. It's always billed as their big 3. But it's that their big 3 are actually Batman, Superman, and Robin. Those are the most iconic, most recognizable characters, and I don't know where she actually ranks, but it was like a marketing thing. Yeah. Whereas I think Storm is an extremely popular member of the X-Men, and I'm surprised they left that one up to a vote, if I'm honest, because I think DC would have sooner seen them.
I think the reality of it is they needed a lady fight to vote on. And
they could have done better if they did Catwoman and Elektra. It wouldn't have mattered as much.
Yeah, but people aren't invested in those characters. Like the thing is like Catwoman and Elektra, like Catwoman was just doing big tits Jim Balance stuff at the time, and Elektra was not really anything. Like she wasn't doing much, right? Dealing with Fall from Grace, wasn't she like bald at one point around this time? I think you have to do Storm and Wonder Woman. They both have been on TV. They're powerful women. They're actually very different. I think the reality, and the other part too, is like the Trinity, the DC Trinity. Yeah, Wonder Woman might not be the more popular because she's not, but she is one of the more important. And that's not something to deny, right?
A very fascinating point about like versus stuff I would bring up to wrestling. We talk wrestling all the time, and I've recently been talking the Attitude Era, which is right near here, WWF versus WCW.
Right, this is the darkest time for WWF right now, by the way.
And you could make the argument that at their peaks, WCW and WWF had commensurate talent. In fact, you could have made the argument WCW, when they started poaching, had better. But like how WCW booked versus WWF eventually led is one of the reasons for the fall. And DC versus Marvel, that's hilarious to hear and learn on Wonder Woman, because it's just, yeah, you can write better, you can book better. And you and I know we're having like back and forth discussions about how like sometimes DC doesn't, like, they have the best IP and they don't always know what to do with it.
That's the line that stopped. Apparently, these crossovers ended because Joe Quesada famously said DC having Batman and Superman was like a porn star having the biggest dick and not knowing how to fuck. And that apparently offended DC so much that they were like, okay, we're not doing these
Yeah,
anymore.
it took a while for them to really heal that up. That was early Joe Quesada, right? That was like when he was still kind of edgelording his way through Marvel Knights stuff before getting up into the and like that, you know, he also saved Marvel. Him and Axel Alonso saved Marvel. So
I mean, people, these are, you know, people always want to fall on one side of it, but people are complex. Like I have a couple of issues with Peter David, but I love his reign. And, you know, I mean, same goes, Joe Quesada, like, there's a lot of calls that he made that I didn't necessarily like, but you can't please everyone all of the time.
No, and it's also, that's humans, you know. And so like when we look at the undercards, right, the 6 undercards, the first one is Aquaman versus Namor. And that's an interesting one. Namor is a much more powerful character physically. He is a stronger character. He is a near Hulk level strength. Aquaman's a strong guy, but not at that level. Namor can't talk to fish. He can't communicate with marine life. So there was only one way this could have gone, right? Plus, Namor is a famous asshole. He's a cocky, famous asshole. They're both rulers of their version of Atlantis, right? Yeah. And yet it's very clear how they were going to do that one, right? Like some of these things, and especially
I loved it. So this is funny where I'm just like, oh, that's clever. But it sounds especially like I do have gaps in some of my comic, like my comic knowledge is very like, you know, 80s, 90s, and then moved on. And in some cases I backfilled it, but you both have, you know, been like, oh yeah, they did this and this before. The end of the fight. Do you want to just do the blow by blow of the fight and then we'll talk at the end?
I mean, we blow by blow, we can just do,
not even blow by, it's quick. It's that they're fighting, like, they're talking, and then Aquaman drops a whale.
Like Namor's being like, you're a little bitch. And Aquaman's just, and I just flattened you with a whale, which also wouldn't have flattened Namor. He's so strong, he would have just thrown him off. But that is a
little
natural
hole for that whale.
Yeah, just a little. Yeah, it's like stepping on a tack.
Yeah.
But it is funny. But yeah, that's the only way that could have gone. Elektra versus Catwoman is a no contest. Elektra is.
I couldn't even figure that page out. I felt dumb looking at it. I don't even know how that resolved.
Catwoman's, I have a whip, and Elektra's, I just beat your ass. And Catwoman's it. And Elektra basically says, I'm an assassin, but I'm not here to kill you. Because basically, Elektra is the Lady Shiva of Marvel. She is an unparalleled martial artist, right? And Catwoman's a cat burglar with a whip. And so there, again, that's like a given. And so basically Elektra, and in a nice Batman Returns nod, Catwoman falls into what is essentially the truck of kitty litter, but it's raw. It's
okay. That's what that.
Yeah, it's a Batman Returns homage, but because they're fighting on a construction site. Now, Flash versus Quicksilver, obvious for the same reasons, right?
What I did love about this is randomly in the middle, a truck almost hits them.
Because of
Flash saves him. Quicksilver's able to get the drop, and then he like pauses because I'm a hero. I can't, like, he hits him like once and could go through it. Like he is strong enough where with that one drop he could do it. And then he like pauses, and then Flash takes him down. And it's like the hero, it's, you know, they give him a moment, right? Because this should be a no contest, but they give Quicksilver like a little nod to do something.
I had an issue with this, and it's not that the Flash won. It's that the Quicksilver did something nice. Because Namor, he's famously an asshole.
He's not really nice if you actually look at it. He doesn't pull back. What he really says is, yeah, real fucking heroic to himself. Yeah. And as he's doing that, I don't even think he really pulls back. Like his thought bubble doesn't necessarily show him, I think, pulling back. It's just that the Flash shows him like, you never really had a chance. Like you weren't, you know, I was never down, and I was never going to be. And it's pretty well known that the Flash is actually quite faster than Quicksilver.
Oh yeah, no, I mean he's meant to have infinite speed at that point, right?
Yeah.
Because of the speed
It's
force.
kind of wild comparing Flash and Quicksilver versus that, because like Marvel would go more physics, right? Quicksilver's fast because his body's built and blah 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 blah, whereas the Flash literally like taps into an infinite source of power.
Yeah.
But then Aquaman versus Namor, like the logic for Aquaman's strength is because he's under the sea and has to deal with the pressure. So that's kind of just the funny one where normally the Marvel characters are more grounded-ish and the DC ones are more like cosmic or magic. And it's funny that on this undercard, two of the like superpowered characters, it's actually flipped in the universes.
Yeah, you know what I thought was interesting is who is noticeably absent here. And can you imagine them doing this today and not including Iron Man? I mean, he wasn't
that's
popular in the 90s. I
he
think people forget that.
Yeah, they kind of reconstruct that, but it's just Iron Man was kind of, I think he has a better space in the amalgam because he's Iron Lantern, right? And,
Yeah, that
and,
is
and stuff like that. But yeah, because people seem to remember the only reason Iron Man got to be a movie in 2008 is because nobody gave a shit about Iron Man.
Well, they
Correct.
didn't own the rights. They didn't own the rights to X-Men or Spider-Man.
Yeah, because all the ones they gave a shit about, people bought. People bought
And-
Spider-Man. People bought the X-Men. They bought those things for cheap, but nobody wanted Iron Man. So
I
that's
think
why they
that-
still had him.
It's also interesting who's missing on the DC side because these days I don't think it's controversial to say that their most popular female character is Harley Quinn. And she wasn't introduced to the comics until 1999, so,
Yeah.
which is later than I thought. I had to look it up. But
Well, I mean, she was
yeah,
in Batman Adventures number 12.
Yeah, but it
which
was
is
not in the
its own
canon.
continuity
Yeah.
of the animated series. And then what you had Mad Love and the Harley Quinn, the one with Alex Ross and stuff like that. But
But
yeah, she is now. It's like Deadpool.
Yeah.
He's the Deadpool of that era. And you'll notice Deadpool's nowhere to be found here because
that's a
Deadpool
good
was
point.
just a random showing up character from a canceled book.
Yeah.
Or like
I
a
could
book.
kind of see those two being a good fight.
They would absolutely be. Like if they are not, because there's spoiler alert, there's a Marvel versus DC or a Marvel DC crossover coming soon. I would put money right now on those two characters meeting.
Has that not fallen through? Because I thought like how quickly these disappeared from the shelves and went out of print. I thought maybe it had been canceled. I don't know.
They just announced it like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, they did? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what a Scott at House of
Guess
Heroes
that's
told
done.
me. I have done no research on it, but I will
Me
say
neither. I just
They
read
announced
these,
it at
but-
Comics Pro. They announced it like 10 miles from my house.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Um,
cool. I mean, I'll read it. This was
yeah.
my end game when I was a kid. So
Yeah. No, it was huge for everyone. I bought it newsstand. So Quicksilver loses. Now the next one is this must have killed you, Dre. You want to cover this?
Here's the thing, because when we talked about the Batman armor, the Azrael Batman, and I'm like, this is sugar on Count Chocula with maple syrup, and I loved it and I ate it up. This hits me, right? I read the Robin comic book. I love the X-Men animated TV show with Jubilee. I don't know how I missed this. This is right in my wheelhouse for when I would have been reading comics, and this was a blind spot, but I still really enjoyed it.
Wasn't a cheap book.
I'm going to shout out going back. We've talked a lot of shows on here. Take a drink, Mike Slater. But Michael, we've talked a lot of like shows and we're like, this is poorly written and it makes sense. And we understand why X-Men, the animated TV show Christmas episode is no one gave a fuck, right? This book was so much better written than it had any need to be, especially since it was 100% a gimmick to sell books. So that's a compliment I'll give. This is one that fell through for me though, because these are two characters in my wheelhouse. And because, as you're noting, Jeff, instead of getting creative artists that like were doing stuff, they got just like can you draw a standard style, which makes sense. This is what we see with
Talented art. It's important to note that I definitely said they are talented artists, but they are certainly of a system.
how I remember it.
But this is the point of some of the Marvel movies when we look at, how did I just drop the guy that dropped Ant-Man?
Edgar.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, very similar to this, where for a lot of the Marvel movies, they want the same thing and don't want stylized. And this is one of the places where I think it hit, because these two characters, Robin and Jubilee, were very stylized in that era, and I liked it. And then when like the form that came out for their verses, I just didn't like the representations. And these are two of my favorite characters. Jeff over at patreon.com sends you cards in the mail. You have sent me the Marvel versus DC card of this.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, these are two of my favorite characters. What did you do to and then, I mean, this is also such a silly fight because to your point, Michael, on like the mutants losing, it's Jubilee is a sidekick on a superhero team that like occasionally comes in. This is, the basketball 1-on-1 versus 5-on-5 and just gets destroyed by Robin. But then they also have some romance. And it's interesting, but it's like they don't let it flesh out until Access, the comic thing. And it's just the art's not great. The thing's not great. It was weird. It was weird to read it.
Okay, so it's kind of fine. It's like one of those things where it's like, it's fine. It actually does a good job. The writing of this is actually better than you realize. Because when you think about it,
the writing is good. The art,
he's teleported.
It's pretty good. But they don't have the time to stretch it out. And the art, I was like, yeah.
He's teleported into Jubilee's bedroom, like Jubilee and Husk's bedroom, right? Which was a nice Husk cameo that they put in there. And they kind of fall for each other, right? They have a little teen romance, and then they're pitted against each other. My funny thing is, these gods are insane for picking these two children as their champions, one of their 11 champions. Like, that to me is the thing where I'm just like, I don't know if you guys knew this, but like the Absorbing Man is still around. You could have picked Absorbing Man.
I mean, they didn't have time to flesh out the rules, but I could see something silly where you were allowed to pick a bad the 11th person on the bench for the opponent, and this is what they did. That would have been fun.
I would have picked just like a random dude.
They chose Ben Reilly instead of Peter Parker.
Yeah, it's just so funny when you don't want to pull the threads too much on it, because then it starts to unravel of like, why are these two teenagers? But Jubilee never had a chance, right? There's no chance she would have on Robin. Robin is a child soldier. And Jubilee is a kid in school at this point in time. Like, she's been a mascot who went to school to be a soldier. And Robin was like, I've been a soldier since I was 9. And I find that very interesting.
This is the Tim Drake one, which is the nerdier one. But to your point, on like Elektra versus Shiva would have been interesting, but they were, of course, going for names that were recognized. That's the other thing. Like Hawkeye versus Green Arrow would have made sense. But anyway.
Which they show that. They actually do an image of those two together.
There are a lot of implied fights going on, and I didn't know until I reread it. I kind of imagined that there were meant to be more fights that we didn't see their results from, but they actually explicitly say at one point what the count is, and it's just the ones that we've seen.
Well, I think that
like
really
Thanos
comes down
versus
to
Darkseid. That's one of
those were street fights, not boxing matches. Those were like people that met each other and were like, "What the fuck are you doing? The fuck out of here!" And like 2 Arrow guys meet each other, one purple, one green, and you're just sitting there just being like, I don't know what your deal is. Why are you stealing my shtick? Like those are more street fights that just kind of accidentally happened. There's a great panel, and I don't know if Dre, did you tell me this or did I tell you this? There's a panel with Hawkman and Archangel that I really like.
I love that. Yeah.
They're just buddies flying around like, I got wings too, man. Isn't that great? I'm a depressed
mine used to be like yours, but they're metal, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, but I mean, even, which is also weird because wasn't Hawkman at the time? Didn't he have those kind of wings, or did they go back? Didn't he have, wasn't that Hawk World? They did. I don't know. But so it's very interesting. Jubilee never stood a chance, right? You can't be the person Batman relies on and not immediately incapacitate her. And what's funny is he does it in a very pacifist way. He basically just wraps her up and you're down. And she's, shit, I thought you were going to hit me. I was literally never going to do that. And I
genuinely thought it was cute, honestly.
Yeah, it was like, it was sweet. It was sort of, it has shades of Elektra versus Catwoman, but like a sweeter version where Elektra's, I'm not going to fucking kill you just because I kicked the shit out of you. Bye. And then she just cuts her whip with her side. And that's the thing. Robin's, I can incapacitate you without harming you. That's how good I am, which I just think is really great.
The reason that they chose Jubilee for that pairing specifically is because they were marketing her as Wolverine's sidekick at that point.
Sure. Well, it's also too,
Larry,
like you were saying too, Robin, very popular character, always will be, right? And it's, who do you match up with Robin? Bucky? Boy, he wasn't around then. So you have to find who's the
It would have been great. You made it Robin versus Wolverine, just been completely stacked.
Robin versus Doomsday. It's like, these guys from the same universe.
I want to see. I want to see that you don't even like sports show where
Thanos.
like you and Adam like in this universe. I want that podcast equivalent where you're just like these matchups and rules make what is going on
Hey,
here.
who put these together? Yeah, but it is. I think the Robin Jubilee thing is actually one of the more important pairings in the entire story because it is two people, two kids that have been given a monumental and important task while they are also falling in love.
Yeah.
And it's very sort of like they're clearly doing a Romeo and Juliet thing here, but also with an understanding that they have a universe to save or whatever. Now, there are two undercards that, and they're only undercards because we know they are, because there is a 0% chance that these aren't two of the most important fights that happen at all, which is Silver Surfer versus Green Lantern, who they had teamed up. Silver Surfer and Green Lantern have absolutely teamed up.
Actually, it hinted at this series. Apparently, I've never actually read it, but it's in the.
Guess who wrote it?
Ron Mars was it?
Yeah, Ron Mars. Yeah. But it's also like Green Lantern can harness energy. Silver Surfer is energy, basically.
Yeah, the note I have in our script is I was just like, this was Mike Tyson in the first 30 seconds against Little Mac. It was just like Green Lantern. I actually loved it, and it makes sense that you're saying Ron Mars has written both. So there's, he understands the characters. These are both my babies. I'm sorry, this one's the better one.
Yeah. And that one of the things too is I think everybody agreed. You're not going to be a Marvel guy and be like Jubilee would take Robin, or like you just wouldn't. Like Catwoman could take Elektra.
There were a few times because I was like a fan of Jubilee because of the animated TV show, and then of course the Gen X comic that came out. Oh my God!
And that amazing Generation X made for TV.
We may have to do a nerd on that someday, Jeff. But anyway, all I was going to say is that a couple times they were like, oh, Jubilee's like a next mutation mutant and her powers are more powerful. And a couple times she was talking to Emma Frost and being like, claiming that she was kind of holding herself back because she was afraid of what she could do. They hinted at that a couple times. Then I think eventually just nomenclature is just, yeah, your fireworks are kind of bullshit.
Yeah, you don't need. It's also, you don't need her to be an Omega level mutant. That's the other thing too, like this thing where they keep trying to level up mutants and make them like, this is actually, one of the more powerful mutants of all time. And it's, I don't know, man, you could maybe have 5 of them and then just continue. Like actually, which is one of the great things actually about the X-Men movie is Wolverine's like, what are you after me for? And Magneto's, I don't give a shit about you. Get the fuck away from me. And he's like, I want the powerful mutant, not the dipshit with metal bones. Go. And it's, yeah, Wolverine's not a powerful mutant at all.
They've made it over the years, like had him survive atomic bombs. And,
sure, yeah, which isn't bad. Like the healing factor is
like
good.
I kind of liked it when he was scrappy, but I don't like that they keep making, like you said, they keep leveling mutants up. There's a point now where I feel like if there's no way to defeat Wolverine, so there's no stakes in any.
Oh, buddy, did you ever read the Punisher versus Wolverine, like back and forth that they did on each other in where the Punisher, I think it's Garth Ennis wrote it. So there's that.
I read a bunch of team ups and when I was younger, but I don't remember.
Maybe it was Garth, but it's drawn by Derek Robertson and it's so good where like Punisher like runs him over with the steamroller and blasts him in the face with a shotgun and then shoots his balls off and just does all these things knowing he's going to heal, but I can incapacitate you. And it's
slow him down.
Yeah, and he certainly does. Which like I don't mind that idea of Wolverine being like a soft immortal that because he still takes all the damage.
Yeah, I just wish maybe it would be nice if they, I don't know, at least made him upset that it hurts.
Yeah, we don't need to make. I mean, which I think a lot of writers have done that now, like where they're just like they know there's a lot of stuff where he's like, all right, this is gonna suck real friggin' bad, right?
Yeah.
So now Silver Surfer versus Green Lantern. Green Lantern's got the ring. Silver Surfer has the power cosmic. So that's another one that's okay. It's pretty obvious, and even Ron Mars, who created Kyle Rayner, right, is just doesn't have a chance, right? And you got a good point. And then Thor versus Captain Marvel, which is another one where Thor's a battle-hardened, god, and Captain Marvel. And when we say Captain Marvel, by the way, we're talking the Shazam character, not Captain Marvel like Carol Danvers, right? Long story. Look into the legalities of that name. Look up Wiz Comics, and you'll see some real interesting story behind Captain Marvel. He has a very weird history. Now,
Yeah, it also extends into the Marvel Man stuff in my neck of the woods because that character is just redrawing a little bit.
yeah,
Super weird.
yeah, and that's boy, is that an interesting run, right?
Yeah.
But Thor, looking the worst he's ever looked, is going up against Shazam, who looks the same as he always has.
I would be worried about the optics if I was Thor in that costume when he turns into Billy Bats. One of you standing too close.
Yeah. Verily, I did not defeat this teen in ways that one would think I thee may have. Oh,
That would have been a hilarious, like, Billy Batson wins by DQ, because just for the recap, they're fighting. They're
that kid
they're
pervert.
They're pretty powerful, but of course Thor is more powerful. Shazam gets incapacitated. I know what I'll do. I'll transform into Billy Batson to get out of where I'm at. I'll transform back into Captain Marvel and keep fighting. When he goes to, so he was already losing, but when he goes to transform back, Thor's, oh, so your power
Is lightning based.
thunder. He's interesting. And there is a funny thing that we'll talk on one of the upper card things where he's cool. I can just absorb this into my hammer, which he does, but then Mjolnir disappears. But then he's okay, you're a kid and I'm a god and it's game over. But it would have been funny if he was just like, oh shit, this looks bad. I got to get out of here. Like, Billy Batson wins by DQ because Thor just like bolts. Because my
I'm not
hammer's
wearing
gone and
this
I'm
shirt near this kid.
anywhere near here. Yeah.
It's what's
Captain Marvel wins because of stranger danger.
yeah. I say this a lot to people when I'm, and I don't like to circle this, especially not to a sports thing, but when I'm boxing, when I'm sparring, and a lot of people that I train with, they'll be like, oh, you're just so, you're just so much better. And I'm just like, I've just been doing it longer. I've been doing this for 24 years. You've been doing it for 3. Why would you think that we would have that evenness? Like, I'm here to help you out, right? I'm here to get you better. Thor has been doing this for eternity. Billy Batson is a child. So yeah, you're gonna beat the child. It makes sense. Dre, if you want to clip that one, go for it. But of course Thor's gonna win. Thor's been a fighting deity for decades, and it doesn't matter how many god powers you have. If you're a teenager, you're a fucking idiot.
I mean, he's even younger than Jubilee and Robin, which makes you question those giant entities even.
Yeah, imagine Jubilee being like, what's this Billy Batson kid doing here? What a nerd. And then all of a sudden it just becomes this beefcake that just
Let me give a shout out request. In a now defunct podcast that Jeff wrote, you interview Ron Mars.
Yeah,
and
I asked him a lot about DC versus Marvel.
I need to track that down because I haven't heard, because I think I've heard some stuff, and it may even be at the end of the omnibus, which I've not gotten all the way through. I'm about a third of the way. It's huge. But I am really interested on some of the pairings. Some of them, like you're pointing out, Robin versus Jubilee kind of makes sense. They're like the sidekick characters. But yeah, Thor versus Captain Marvel is a fascinating one. And some of these are snapshots in time, because as we're noting, like Robin versus Jubilee, since we were there and these were books we were reading or properties we kind of know, but it is so fascinating to go back in time. And if you don't fully know the whole Clone Saga stuff, which we'll get to in the upper card in a second, you might be like, Spider-Man versus Superboy. That's a weird choice, but
clones.
They're both clones, yeah.
Send in the clones. All right, Jeff. Now, if you're all right with this, normally you're the person who makes the games, and I'm still okay with you being the game master. But
I have no ego about the games. You can do whatever you want.
Oh, no, you're much better at running the games than me. But what I was going to propose is we have 5 fights that if you were alive in the 90s and had a computer, you could have voted on the internet. And these are the big hitters.
And by the way, we're even now. So just so you know, it's even. It's 3-3.
Which was, I mean, this is obvious. This is wrestling booking, right? They clearly set it up. They're like, we know how it's going to go. So we have the big 5 fights that are coming up that you could vote on. We're going to read through them and talk about them. But at the end, I would love if each of us came up with swap out one of the characters, make a different fight. And then also I want to know if we all vote the same. So the first one, and I'll let you run it, Jeff, but it's Superman versus Hulk. I assume we all vote the same here, right?
Yeah, Superman.
Yes, with the understanding that I don't think people understand how strong Hulk is.
It's not just strength, though.
I know.
I mean, I used to, when I was a kid and I was voting all Marvel, yeah, the Hulk is meant to be kind of infinitely strong, right? According to, but Superman has super speed and all of these other powers. It's kind of why they never used that in the Doomsday fight, but it never made sense to me as a kid.
Yeah, I think they just matched up their speeds at that point in time. So the thing is, I think Savage Hulk has a better chance against Superman than Professor Hulk, because Savage Hulk is a wild animal. And I don't care. I'm bigger, stronger, and have more talents than a honey badger. But if one attacks me, I'm going to have a difficulty with it. And that's kind of the way I would view the Savage Hulk is if that Hulk gets a hold of Superman, it's going to be a problem. Whereas Professor Hulk has the governor of like humanity on it. Savage Hulk is more like a force of nature.
They actually did this. It was a surprise in the second Spider-Man Superman team up from way back when. The Hulk shows up and Superman fights him, and it's several pages, and it's the Savage classic Hulk. And he's the problem. No.
Whereas like Professor Hulk, no chance. And obviously the vote goes the way he's like a much more popular character. So,
but by the way, Jeff, there's a couple things I would have loved, right? The rules of this don't make sense, as we've mentioned. Like apparently incapacitating is enough. That's what makes like Wolverine interesting, because like
they literally bring up wrestling in this.
So, but all I was going to say is it would be funny if we did like Tarascasi rules and Superman just wins by like ring out
Immediately.
All right. So let's start with the Michael. Who you swapping out and who you picking?
Ooh, I think Hulk versus Solomon Grundy would be an interesting one, I guess. But I guess Savage classic Hulk instead of modern one, rather, instead of the smart Hulk. I don't really know who in Marvel stable you could put Superman up against for that.
I have one.
Oh,
I have two, actually, but we already used one of them, Silver Surfer.
Oh, yeah, no, that would work. Or Thor, I guess.
Thor would be the main one.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you grabbed that too, because Thor, not just by like power stuff, but he also is magic.
Yeah, he would. Yeah, not Superman. But actually, yeah, that would be the.
And to be fair, JLA Avengers, they correct this. They correct this in 2004 or whatever. Yeah. But so, yeah. And then there is one more option you could use, but I don't think there's no way she would have been usable at this time. It would be Carol Danvers.
Oh, that if we're doing modern, I love that. I'm just going to copy on because, we're close in time, so I don't want to take too much time. I like Superman versus Captain Marvel. Beautiful. Love it for modern. Fun one. Don't even know how I'm voting. Vote in the comments below. All right. Next one, Jeff. This one made me sad. You voted wrong, you jerks. Yeah.
I'm sorry you like DC teens, man, but
that's what I read. It's this is
experience, man. It's experience. You got to remember experience.
He has tactile telekinesis, Jeff, which showed up in the clip they didn't use, which would have been hilarious. Anyway,
tactile telekinesis is just a creative way of saying this is why he's strong.
I like that as an explanation for why he's strong, but no one's voting against Spider-Man except for Dre. I mean, even Ben Reilly Spider-Man, any Spider-Man I'm voting for. Yeah, and I like Superboy from the 90s.
Now, I think a better fight for this specific fight might be, and now I'm thinking about it and I'm like, I don't really know how we would go about this, but Spider-Man versus actually Deathstroke might be a better scenario. And then you could also say, you're not going to bother with Spider-Man, Batman, because that's already a thing, right? So what DC characters have anything sort of emblematic of what Spider-Man can do or could cancel that character out? Because that's really what it comes down to, right? Like you need somebody who's quick, weird, flippy. The Creeper?
Yeah. No.
There's not much to it.
For the story, I guess it'd be kind of interesting to see Spider-Man versus the Flash, but it'd be a no contest.
Yeah. Knew about that, yeah. Unless they were having the conversation and Spider-Man webbed up his feet while he wasn't paying attention, and when Flash tried to take off, he just ate shit into the ground.
I'm struggling to think, because I actually might leave this one alone. And by the way, I think we said it earlier on the show, but yeah, the fight here is Superboy is more powerful, but Spider-Man gets in front of an electric generator, moves out of the way. Superboy goes in.
Smarter than him. Yeah.
And the rules of this fight seem to be like, if you just basically get like a mostly knockdown, because most of these characters are knocked down in a way that they could get up if you gave them like 2 minutes, but it is like boxing, like you get 10 seconds.
The way they explain it is akin to a pinfall in wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So like shoulders are down, held down, you lost, basically.
I think I'm leaving this one alone, which is lame because that's just classic me. I love Superboy.
It's just a weirdly unbalanced fight anyway, and it's like a very of its time. It's two clones, but the reality is Spider-Man's just way smarter. He's just got more. He's got more experience. It's not even smarts; it's experience. He knows how to bait somebody into smashing their face into an electrical transformer, basically.
all of my answers for the DC one. I just put Robin in.
Robin of
Yes.
all of them, yeah.
It's Wolverine versus Robin.
If we just do all of Marvel DC over again, but just have
Hulk
only
versus
Robin.
Robin. You have the Loki
keep
scene and
bringing
it's
him
just a
back to
bloody-
life.
Batman versus Captain America is an interesting one.
I missed this in the thing because it looked like to me that they go for hours. So they're in the sewers. They go for hours and they're like respecting each other, and it is the case. And then the sewer water washes out, and what?
It's embarrassing.
And then this is the point in the storyline, which doesn't really matter, but this is like the turning point in the storyline where the characters are like, oh, can we convince the gods? By the way, the gods eventually fight, and then they agree they're both cool, and then they go on their separate ways.
Batman- Yeah,
It's
Batman.
a schmoz. That's fine. There has to be a schmoz ending to this thing, but
Cap loses by not losing. He basically gets hit with a blast of sewage water that he swallows, admittedly, which is very funny. And Batman saves him from drowning. And he's like, I win. And Cap's like, I know, right? Anyway, we need to be the moral compass for these two giant characters, for these two representatives. And so Batman and Captain America basically become the sort of deus ex machinas, pardon the phrasing in this case, but of how to solve this problem, because their different origins show the other side why it's fucking stupid.
by the way, actually comparing us to like modern fighting games, because my kiddo's really into Super Smash Brothers, this is the situation where the fight goes too long. It's sudden death at the end. There's like a fire ring around the end. So essentially, the way this fight resolves, and you're answering it, is Batman and Captain America go toe-to-toe, go the distance, and then the universe just throws sewer water. And between the two of them, Batman is more equipped to not get hit because Captain America's not going to care. Fine. And I guess Batman officially wins. It makes sense. Of course, the fans were going to
Yeah,
vote.
the fans voted. The logical answer to this, though, is if they had gone for hours, Captain America would win, because Captain America doesn't really fatigue the same way that Batman does. Like, Batman's in great shape, but after running a marathon, you're going to be tired, whereas Cap doesn't really have that problem. So
Back then, Captain America didn't really have superpowers, though. He was just meant to be kind of like the perfect man. That was even an arc in Avengers at one point.
when they pulled the super serum out of him, or
No, he has the super serum, but that's only meant to make him as effective as the most peak athlete in every field. And Batman's kind of got that going for him too, plus a bunch of gadgets. And I can see that going any other way on it.
but not really. Like, he's got super soldier serum. Like, reality.
Nowadays, they've inflated what that means. But I swear to God, you go back to the
No,
old.
I totally
the old
believe you. I'm
stories.
just, it's dumb. They would never throw this together, but the real one would be Batman versus Moon Knight. And Batman would kill him, or kick his ass. But like, Moon Knight,
Peacemaker, modern Peacemaker versus Captain America would be a fun one.
that would
go
be
to
an
Cap,
interesting
but it
one.
would be
Yeah,
fun to
yeah.
see.
I mean, that's like Nuke. He's like basically Nuke, I guess, in that regard.
My
Also,
joke answer, I love Jeff's Batman versus Moon Knight is perfect. And then
or
my
also
joke,
Batman versus Daredevil.
ooh, it is Batman. Oh, no, that is the answer, because that's the classic hackney, but it's correct joke. The person who like fights crime for fun is called Batman, and the person who's blind with echolocation is called Daredevil. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. It's Batman
The
versus.
specific.
First,
They mention
Cross.
Daredevil in this.
Yeah.
When they have Bullseye show up in the Batcave and explicitly say that Batman hits harder
Hardly,
than
yeah.
Daredevil, which is.
but yeah, but I think
I'm
Daredevil
guessing
would-
DC produced that one.
well, it's funny. No, because Batman would hit harder than Daredevil, but
Yeah, like,
he'd have to be able to hit Daredevil, which would be a very harder thing to do because of the whole, hearing and predicting and doing all of his moves and shit like that.
plus, I kind of like the idea that people don't really know what they're up against with Daredevil. They don't know he's blind or how his powers
Yeah.
work. They just know that he's, yeah, but that would be a really good.
Yeah,
pairing.
and it's also one of those things too where I think that's actually the first DC versus Marvel interaction we have, or it's Spider-Man and Joker, and
Yeah, 'cause
then
Spider-Man
it's
and Robin.
Bullseye and Batman and Robin, right?
Yeah.
Batman obviously wins. I don't know, man. I think Cap probably most likely, because it doesn't seem like Batman has time to prepare the sewer. They get teleported to a thing. I genuinely think Cap would win.
Also, we get a weird rock, paper, scissors, because in this series, because the rules of this fight make no sense. We've all agreed, but they just need to get the panels. At one point, Captain America is fighting Bane, who took down Batman. He throws his shield. Bane picks him up, is going to do the knee smash.
your only weapon.
and then the shield comes back and hits Bane in the back, and boom, Captain wins. So they have this weird rock, paper, scissors where Captain America beats Bane, who's beaten Batman. Batman beats Captain America because he's more cunning, whatever, It's good wrestling booking. I like it. We all know who the fans were going to vote for.
Important to note that the only reason that Bane beat Batman was because Batman was purposefully exhausted during Nightfall.
Yeah, he beat him with his brain, Jeff. That's the point.
Oh, I
Bane
know.
is more
It's just-
powerful. He's also got the brain.
Bane one-on-one has been sort of taken out by Batman many times after the fact because I haven't actually had to fight 35 people before getting to you.
Hey, how much Adderall does Batman have in his system when he's in that last fight with Bane? I've read that series so many times. He's like exhausted, going up. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that would, I think, be there. And then Cap, I hate to say him again, but Cap and Deathstroke. I mean, really, Deathstroke and Taskmaster, that should be
Oh yeah, that would be amazing.
the like back and forth. Or if you want to get meta, Deathstroke and Deadpool.
Well, both Taskmaster and Deadpool are inspired by Deathstroke.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it would be.
I mean, what Rob Liefeld says. And
Yeah,
I mean,
Wade
lie about
Wilson. Rob, really? Why rewrite it, Rob? Just fucking own it. Along
the
with him
next
very
one-
well, but man,
The next one's interesting because I think, based on their powers alone, Lobo would have spread Wolverine across that bar like butter on
Lobo's a
toast. It would-
Superman level character. Yeah.
I mean, Wolverine would have grown back later. But he would have lost.
Yeah,
So-
that's it. It's essentially this is Wolverine versus the Hulk.
Yeah.
Like
Well, I think it's insane what they show Lobo do, and he's just unstoppable.
yeah,
He's like,
Lobo's a parody character.
Yeah.
There's a reason when they amalgamize him, it's Lobo the Duck.
yeah. I
Like,
think that's
he's
maybe partially to tell fans that it's who didn't get it
Yeah.
that it's a joke.
And Wolverine wins because Wolverine was at that time the most popular character in comic books.
Mhm.
That's popularity contest aspect for you. The two X-Men characters, spoiler alert, are going to do great.
I think we all agree. And I think Ron, even I think in this, apologizes. I'm sorry I had Wolverine. You understand it was a fan vote. This is the all-star game. It's yes, we understand Kobe Bryant shouldn't have been there in front of this guy, but the fans voted on it. That's who they picked. So
It's funny story that he specifically brings that, or I maybe specifically bring that up on that episode of Sideshow.
I need to track that down. I'm absolutely going to
People talk about it all the time.
What's who we have in a Wolverine fight? Is there a better Wolverine opponent?
Is
I
there a
actually,
better?
I actually have one that's. We kind of covered this already, and I think you're both going to disagree. But I'd like to see Wolverine versus Batman.
That's a classic
I-
one. I like that
Yeah,
one.
that's a pretty. I think Bat and the Sun's even done that before.
I think it would be interesting. I think they'd be more matched than, or you could write them in a way that they'd be more matched than you think.
Yeah, I mean, because there are honestly, like when you look at it and you look at who would be available and like how, because again, Wolverine with the claws, because you could say Killer Croc would be an interesting one. Like
Mhm.
Killer Croc would be a good at a mutated level of Killer Croc. That he might be a good one, but also. Like, what DC character would you? Because I think Lobo would be would be a really great character to fight.
Hulk.
What you're going to say?
Did I say Lobo Hulk? That would be good, right?
I was going to say Lobo Hulk or Lobo Silver Surfer.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
both.
Like different version. Well, though, no, Silver Surfer is just going to win anyway.
Or Wolverine versus Robin.
I
So
am
good.
more of the. No,
So
here's the thing. This is very similar to our Billy Batson outcome because
Yeah.
Wolverine, as we know, Kitty Pryde, Rogue. They remember briefly Rogue was like a teen and they like aged her up, and then of course Jubilee. Like it was a running theme to basically Batmanize Wolverine with a plucky teen sidekick. And so
Yeah,
I would love it. Robin shows up and it's like Wolverine's gonna win, and he's just like, come with me, bub, and they just like team up, and that's how he wins. Robin
Imagine getting training
himself.
from Wolverine as opposed to Batman and that too. Should I be
Yeah,
drinking
have
this much
claws.
beer, Wolverine? Yeah, it's fine.
your mutant healing.
It'd be like the Cobra Kai to the Karate Kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's because like they're just two. What it really comes down to is they're the two cigar smoking, stubbly scumbag characters, but they're
Yeah.
on such totally different levels that the fact that Lobo wins. The only thing that could have happened was just basically Wolverine sticking 6 claws into Lobo's stomach and ripping high. Like, sure, that could work, like.
Yeah. Apparently,
Yes.
it's not, I never. read like all of Lobo, but apparently around the time this came out, if his blood was spilled, members of his race would pop up from the ground that you'd have to fight to the death, which is an absurd and funny.
That's so funny. That's such a Keith Giffen thing, right?
I
Whether or
mean,
not
it's
he did
brilliant.
that, yeah.
I don't think I can't even think, even getting him feels like, I mean, it's Lobo. He probably fashioned his guts into a noose or something.
Yeah, yeah, it's just an interesting one. And then the one that was the dark horse is Wonder Woman versus Storm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this one gets interesting because Wonder Woman briefly, like Thor's hammer gets blown away in the fight with Billy Batson. It shows up in front of Wonder Woman. Of course, she is worthy to wield it. She picks it up. Boom. She does the Jane in Thor 3, which I still haven't seen, but that does happen. It's an awesome look, almost an amalgam. It's an amalgam outside of amalgam, which is pretty awesome. And then she's like, this is cheating. She's like, if I've got Thor's hammer, it's all over. I'm going to put Thor's hammer down, fight Storm one-on-one. And Storm's like, very similar to what you were saying about Superman.
But I will not yield.
Oh,
If she's not the one that needed a power upgrade there, you wouldn't have thought, right? I mean,
Wonder Woman's pretty powerful. Yeah.
I mean, well, the thing is that Storm is an Omega level mutant. She's one of the ones that should be an Omega level mutant. Like when they really talk about what those are, and it's I don't know how they do it in X-Men. I'm way behind, but I know Magneto's one, Professor X, Jean Grey.
no, Professor X isn't.
He's
The
not.
Iceman is.
Magneto, Jean Grey, and Storm is definitely one. And yes, obviously.
Basically, Storm does what you were kind of saying Superman could do. It's, I can fly up in the air and just keep hitting you from the air, and I don't care how I don't even care that you can fly. You just can't reach me. So that's how the fight definitely ends.
I am just kind of surprised that DC left this one up to chance or didn't rig it. It just seems like she's too precious of a character to them. But I'm not surprised that the vote went this way because X-Men was so popular in the 90s and Storm was an incredibly popular character and more interesting than Wonder Woman, I think.
I remember when they had the editors in a Wizard article about these, and they were kind of like going off on like the fan votes and trying to get people on their sides. And I think it was Grunwald basically said, oh yeah, Storm's going to win. She's like she's a natural leader. She knows how to take point, blah, 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 and all that. And so I think it's Carlin goes, well, Wonder Woman's led teams too. And then he just goes, into cancellation. And it was such a great, amazing joke, whether or not that was actually planned or not, like whether that, I don't know what the kayfabe on that is, but I still remember this 30 years later. I remember that very specific thing of, into cancellation.
Solid bone. Yeah.
Trying to think if there are any other good matchups for this one. Both would be fun to swap out. I'm trying to think who would be good against Wonder Woman from.
I mean, we keep mentioning Carol Danvers.
Carol Danvers.
Even the Warbird version.
Rogue would be a great character against Wonder Woman.
Oh, Jeff, no, actually, my thought. Officially, of this fight, if Wonder Woman had won, which there is an alternate panel for, is she now leader of the Morlocks?
The transitive property of Morlocks.
I would have liked to have seen Rogue. Pretty much, she's such a versatile. She's got such a versatile power set and such an interesting idea for a character. It would have been great to see her up against Morlocks anyway. I didn't even think about her until now. But if they don't know what's coming and she just lays one hand on them, then
I wonder
Superman versus Superman.
If Rogue's absorption powers would work on Wonder Woman if Wonder Woman's made of like clay, if there would have some sort of like thing where she's, but I'm not human. I know you absorb powers, but I'm clay. So
that would have been an interesting twist.
It could have been an interesting twist that they could have had on there where she would like, it's about time for lights out. And then she gets up there and touches her to win. And then Wonder Woman's, I'm sorry, but that only works on meat, and then fucking drills her.
The popular Rogue would have won. The X-Men was so popular at this
so
point.
hot. Yeah. I mean, it's not really much to it. I mean, the reason this was a vote was because it's all dudes. You had to put a little bit of diversity in there.
And by the way, I was going to say we absolutely do not have time for amalgam, but there is. So first, I want to throw this out. Michael, thank you for joining. There are so many future shows. I would love to hear more about the Deadpool stuff, possibly at some point. If Jeff ever wants to talk more, I would love to have the time and bandwidth to do the Clone Saga. So people let us know in the comments. Amalgam is fun too. There are a bunch of comics, they were these one-offs where the premise was Axis, who is this character who's holding the universe together, apparently his future and past self. Good writing. Actually, it is really good writing. He briefly tries to bring the universes together to keep the gods from fighting. And it's like this pocket dimension that kind of, spoiler to Donnie Darko, has to like collapse. And the wild thing, and Ron Mars did this, and Ron Mars, you're so damn clever. I'm going to give a spoiler, so wait. I'm giving a spoiler on Amalgam. If you haven't read Amalgam, if you don't want it spoiled, wait. But the spoiler is that basically there is a Doctor Strange fate in this universe.
Yeah.
And we think it's, Doctor Strange and Doctor Fate together. It's actually Charles Xavier, and Charles Xavier in this pocket universe realizes what's going on and is trying to hold everything together. And he's like this master. And this is before like House of M and stuff. So it was like just an incredible twist. Good stuff.
I'm going to do a quick
Let's see.
rundown of the Amalgam titles right before we get to the sort of finish. So you had Amazon, which is Wonder Woman and Aurora, right? So you have Assassins, which is Elektra Kyle, right? She plays Cat's Eye, and there's other characters too. I'm just giving you the names. Doctor Strange Fate, which you just mentioned. JLX, which I think is a really interesting one, right? So it's just
That didn't get
an X-Men.
reprinted. That didn't get reprinted.
No, I wonder why. Legends of Darkclaw, which was clearly the representative character of Amalgam. It's Batman and Wolverine. Really cool design, if I'm being 100% honest. Minus the claws having jagged chunks on it.
I disagree. I hate that design. I think it's really over-designed. But
I think that's what I like about it. I don't like it's also Jim Ballant that did that artwork, and I think that was a good use of him. And then we had Legends of the Dark Claw. We had Super Soldier, which is Captain America.
Super Soldier. That was actually really clever, and I was like, this could be a book where it was like basically Superman's genes are used as the super serum for the Captain America thing. So
the shield is a Superman shield. It's really cool. We also have Bruce Wayne, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I fucking love that title. That idea is so good. Bullets and Bracelets, which is Diana Prince with Elektra. There's Magneto and the Magnetic Men. You can figure that one out. Speed Demon, which is just brilliant because I believe it's Ghost Rider and the Demon.
It's Ghost Rider, the
it's
Demon,
the Flash and Ghost Rider.
It's Flash, Ghost Rider, and the Demon.
And the Demon mixed together, yeah. Spider Boy. Don't ask. X Patrol, which is like
a spider and a clone, but it doesn't mean yet.
Yeah, X Patrol is interesting because it's X Force and Doom Patrol, which is just fun. And so that's what we had in this first run. Now, basically, to wrap the whole thing up, the Spectre and the Living Tribunal are basically doing their best to try to keep these deities from destroying each other. And what they do is Batman and Captain America's origins are like projected onto them to show like humanity. And they're like, oh, it's cool. Bye.
I'm stuck here, Jeff, because, and I almost want to be like earmuffs, Jeff. There's this story device of the gods are fighting and you kind of convince them and whatever has been done, and it's been done epically and better. Even if you think like Lord of the Rings, the problem with this is that's the biggest compliment I can give this, is that it's such amazing IP and they didn't squander it, but they clearly were told they were even told the outcomes, right? Like, these are the outcomes of the fight you have to do.
Well, they came up with the outcomes, really. Yeah. For the majority of them.
But I guess that's the thing about this, is just so much of this seems lame, and I'm giving it the Game of Thrones season 7 outcome, which is it's just too crammed, and had there been time to breathe, but we understand why there was not time for this to breathe.
They did the best they could under the auspices with which they had to put this thing together. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as a kid, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world, and see what it is now.
I'll throw this out. I bought this book as an adult, and I didn't have the nostalgic arguments, and I don't regret it. And I think that's the best thing, is if we're revisiting our childhood. I revisited Impulse with Jeff, and I'm like, I still love this book. I can go back. It's not like He-Man. I've done that. We've talked about this a lot. We've talked He-Man to death. Every time I revisit He-Man, I'm like, I just have to be like, you're a kid. Action figures are cool. You were a kid. Action figures are cool. This kind of stuff revisiting was a lot of fun. And I'm assuming you're in that boat too, like revisiting the omnibus, all that. Enjoyed it. Good stuff.
I mean, I had fun. Yeah, there's a lot of nostalgia there, but
that's the answer. It's Mom's Meatloaf.
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, I'm not gonna go a bat for everything in it. I thought it had less to be embarrassed about than I
Yeah.
expected for a 30-year-old book. I mean,
And they weren't
it
done.
does the job.
We're going to get a sequel, what, 6 months later with DC Marvel All Access?
Which is the character that joins him, and he brings together Jubilee and Robin on a date and gets shot. It's oh my
Great.
god,
That's
so
awesome. I love that. I love every ounce of that.
much.
And
Like
then,
I don't like Jeff when you're talking smoking the whole carton, Jeff. The first series didn't feel like that to me. I was like, I enjoy this, or like the band. I was like, I enjoy this. And then when they're like, we're gonna put Robin and Jubilee on a date together, and this is like what I would have liked as like a preteen. I was like, okay, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. I get it. I'm like, I get it, Jeff. I smoked the whole carton. I'm wrong. I get it. I'm like,
Yeah.
let's move on.
one of the things that I do love about this, though, is that this is eventually going to get us to JLA Avengers, which is actually just a beautifully done piece by Kurt Busiek and George Perez. So you have your JLA Avengers. Is that the Hero Initiative trade paperback?
I don't think you can get this anymore, right? Like, I think it's
When was that printed?
I don't know actually.
Was that the one that they just released as a
No, I've had
George
this for
Perez? Okay,
years.
so that was from before. Yeah, Hero Initiative released a trade paperback to benefit George Perez when he was sort of on his way out. Marvel and DC sort of agreed to just allow the publishing to go and then to use all the money to go towards George. And there was only like a few hundred or a few thousand copies that existed. I have the issues 1 through 4 of that. I have an issue 1 that I graded at a 9.8 that I still have just for fun. But we have this coming down the pike. We have another crossover, and I'm very excited I think because of the effect, the nostalgic effect that people have on 1995, you can get amazing writers who grew up on this kind of stuff. You could get a Tom King maybe, or something like that, who has written Batman and Avenger, and Vision and all this stuff. There's a lot of really good stuff to be done. You could have Mark Waid, right? You could have Kurt Busiek, if he's you have these options, and I'm
want
really
to see it
looking
given to
forward.
Grant Morrison. That would be blessed, I think.
Yeah, so it would be about how superheroes all suck. It would be reductive. And
It
would,
works on
like,
me every single
Yeah.
time. Superman is one of the best superheroes.
to be fair, yeah, it's also it's just very funny when you see it. And it's a lot of these sort of UK Garth Ennis creating all the anti-superhero books and stuff like that, and like doing the Punisher and just shitting on the idea, doing the Boys and shitting on the idea. I always found
Well,
that very funny.
It all stem. The British attitude is different from the American one, because if you meet up with an American, they ask you how you're doing, and you don't ask British people that. You just bitch about the weather.
Oh.
And you see that coming through in all of those British creators.
Yeah, that is fair. But yeah, so ultimately, if we're looking at this and wrapping up our thoughts on it as we were before, it is a perfectly serviceable piece of nostalgia that is a fun peek at a desperate time, and it reminds me of when I was 14. And that's awesome.
I'm going to steal a thought, and I definitely want to give you a second wrap up because I've been loving hearing you talk about all this. But I was going to say, Jeff, kind of stealing something you did about Impulse, where you're talking about just so fun to watch like Ramos learn. It is so fun to look at certain creatives, and kind of watch what they do. And like I said, this is almost like an improv night or something silly. And like I said, what's funny for me is I go back impressed. The only criticism of this book, and I apologize if I offend someone, is just I was such a Jubilee and Robin fan. That was a crossover I would have loved as a kid. And I mean, yes, I'm looking at it as a 40-year-old adult, but I was just like, what did you do? And you introduced me to this, Jeff. When you sent me the Marvel versus DC card, I was like, what in the world is this? And then when I like read the storyline and read the axis, I was just like, no. Like nostalgic me is like, no. I'm like,
You might be
this to my nostalgia.
the only person alive who says, DC versus Marvel was pretty good, but the Jubilee Robin stuff needs a little work. And in my
Yes.
head, I'm just like, nobody gave a shit about. That's like, I care about it now because I see why they're important to the story. but that's dumb as shit.
But by the way,
I
what's
love
hilarious is
that.
I'm even like, the plot line isn't bad. The writing's actually pretty good. I'm like, you fix the art, you fix the look.
I'm going to wrap up with 2 questions.
Yeah.
First one, does anyone know who won?
Well, Marvel won the numbers.
Marvel won.
Yes.
But it's vague. They never explicitly say it.
Yeah, they don't have time.
Yeah. And 2, I don't think we ever covered this, but you Marvel fans or DC fans, what's your poison? What do you pick?
All right. As mentioned, here is the point where there is amazing bonus content. I'm not stealing anything from you. No surprises. There is not actually a conclusion. Spoiler alert, just like in the book DC versus Marvel, the 2 cosmic entities basically decide in a draw. Nobody wins. And Jeff and Michael are the same way. I'm not pulling the rug out from you. The conclusion Jeff and Michael have is there is no winner. What they do, however, is spend about 15 minutes discussing comics across eras, favorite storylines. It is a fantastic listen. If this podcast on its own didn't convince you that more content with Jeff and Michael Vincent Bramley discussing comics isn't a must, but it is over at patreon.com/Jeff May if you are listening to this on the free feed. If you're not listening on the free feed and are a patron, just wait a little while. It'll be at the end of the show. Thanks so much. And we're going to hear Jeff wrap up the episode now.
So ultimately, Marvel versus DC is 2 companies that are drowning, realizing that if they can help each other, they can prevent that death, right? And so they did their jobs. They staved it off a little bit. They kind of survived. Marvel will file for bankruptcy soon, unfortunately. And they go through, and that's just, you can get into venture capitalist crap after that point in time. But what it really comes down to is 2 groups putting aside their differences professionally, because a lot of these people were all friends, to put something together that would interest the fans, that would get people to come into comic shops, that would try to sort of resuscitate their dying thing and hopefully teach themselves some lessons about where they screwed up in the early to mid 90s and where they can move forward to creating a better company that is more focused on story, more substance than style, right? And to push it through. It wasn't about the flashy 90s things that everybody loves. It was about telling good stories. And that was eventually going to show up there. This is going to be that linchpin that goes through. And MVB, I'm really glad this is such an important part of your comics origin. And it makes me super happy.
It was great to talk about it. I don't think I've talked this much about it in my entire life, but thanks for having me.
This exceeded my expectation. And by the way, go vote. Lobo is supposed to win the fight between Wolverines. So I'm just letting you know if you're doing that. Thank you both so much for doing this. By the way, interestingly enough, Jeff, to just put the capper on the meta-ness of this narrative, the 2 icons, Captain America and Batman, literally team up while they're drowning in the storyline. So yeah. All right. Now, by the way, let's just do some plugs. So Michael, anything you want to plug? We did mvbramley.art is the site. And I think you have your links there. You're of course mvbramley.art on Blue Sky as well as Instagram. Other stuff to plug, any other projects, stuff we should be aware of?
Nothing I'm ready to announce yet, but go listen to Badical, Tom Ryman's podcast. I think he has his own feed. I did a lot of the artwork for it, and I love it. So
I've heard Vinny Sachs is a pretty interesting character.
Yeah, he's voiced. No, it's a real laugh. That would be a good place to start that episode, or the one that Brockway did. 2 of the best so far, I think.
Just start from the first. Listen in. It's a great show.
All right, Jeff.
I mean, look, if you're here, that means that you are at least secondarily familiar with Jeff Has Cool Friends. If you are listening to this for free, thank you so much. That means a lot to me that you took your time to listen to our show. And if you want early access to this show with bonus content, head over to patreon.com/Jeff May, where you can get not only that, but Jeff Has Cool Friends early, uncensored with bonus content as well. And the Patreon exclusive Ugh Fine with Kim Crawl. I do a ton of great stuff with the aforementioned Tom Ryman on Gameplay and Employed, with Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, as well as all the amazing things I do with Adam Todd Brown on the You Don't Even Like This Network thing. I have a great YouTube channel called Jeff Has Cool Cards. You can check that out. On Monday nights, Dre will do the occasional I Must Drake You. And of course, I on Wednesday do I Must Break You. And then on Friday afternoons, I often do a mailbag if I have mail. But yeah, so check all that stuff out. And thank you all for joining. And on Instagram, I'm at Hey There Jeffro too. God damn it.
The sequel. Sequel's better than the first, just like The Godfather and Ewoks: The Battle for Endor.
Less than 10% of my following back. Less than 10%.
No, it's... All right, you can find me most places on the internet as Nerd Numbers, including Blue Sky, where I am nerdnumbers.com, because I have the domain. I'm most proud of this. Please go to patreon.com/Jeff May. Vote to see who should win on this one. Subscribe for the bonus features. You can still be a producer. You can get cards sent in the mail, just like Michael is going to get this month. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next month with another nerdy subject.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Nerd. If you want to help keep the podcast growing, it's definitely worth your while to head over to patreon.com/Jeff May. Also, you'll get early access to cool stuff. Cool stuff like videos of Jeff showing off awesome collectibles and pack-breaking videos. And it's also worth your while to check out Jeff May's YouTube channels. That's right, channels. For Pack Breaking by Jeff and myself, head over to youtube.com/@JeffHasCoolCards, where Jeff breaks packs weekly, opens stuff you send him in the mail, and sometimes even gives away cool prizes. For Jeff's podcasts, head over to youtube.com/@HeyThereJeffro. That's spelled JEFFRO. And shocker, he uses that name across a lot of social media, including Blue Sky. You can find him at Instagram at HeyThereJeffro, but you're going to have to add a 2 to the end. So that's HeyThereJeffro2 over at Instagram. You can find me most places on the internet as Nerd Numbers. Shout out to Chris Haugen for the outro theme of Pure Magic. Thanks so much, and we'll be back with another nerdy subject soon.